June stood at the window and couldn't take her eyes off the falling snowflakes. It was the first snow. How beautiful it was. The snowflakes were falling gently to the ground, as if they were racing with each other. When June was a little girl, she loved winter so much. After all, everyone celebrated Christmas, and it was June's favourite holiday. Those were wonderful moments, moments filled with magic. How quickly the years flew by. Now she's 29 years old. Oh, she would love to go back to her childhood, even if only for a minute. She would like to believe in miracles again, to have some hope. For a long time, she was not happy about anything, and she no longer believed in miracles. And once she and her husband had planned to celebrate all the Christmas holidays together, to be always close to each other. Sometimes she thought she could still smell the scent of his perfume. She liked to just lie down, cuddled up to her beloved, and breathe in his fragrance, while he stroked her hair. When they parted, it was very difficult for her. Now June lived only for her son Walter, trying to be a good mother, though of course she did not always succeed. June was still immersed in depression over her husband's betrayal, and she did not always manage to give her son the love and care that he so needed. Suddenly, June flinched. It was her son who came up behind her and took her hand. "Mom, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, son. You must be mistaken." "How can I be sad when I have you?" replied June, and then she leaned over and kissed her son. "Mum, can we go outside? I want you to take me sledding very much." "Well, if you really want to, let's go." Soon the holidays were over and work began. June was late again. Punctuality was not her strong suit. No matter what time she got up, she was still 10 minutes late. Colleagues were already in their seats. June said hello to everyone and went to her workplace. Just then, Sheila, June's friend, came over to chat with her. She bragged about how she had spent the holidays with another boyfriend and showed her pictures. Sheila was a gorgeous girl and always attracted a lot of attention from men. June liked her too, because Sheila was cheerful, sociable, and they often substituted for each other at work. "June, how did you spend the holidays? Why don't you tell?" asked Sheila after telling her about all her adventures. "Usually, we were mostly at home with Walter." "I see. Well, it's good to be at home too," replied Sheila, and went back to her workplace. The workday was coming to an end when June was summoned by her boss. Of course she was surprised, because she called her very rarely, and all the yearly reports had already been submitted. "Hello, June. Have a seat," said Mrs. Battler when June entered her office. "You've been working for years, and you've always been on my good account. However, I've learned something about you, and I'm very disappointed." June turned white with surprise. "Mrs. Battler, I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand what this is about." "Oh, so you don't understand. Well, I'll tell you. Not only you're telling some dirty gossip about me to the staff, but you also started selling information to our competitors. I'm very disappointed. You're fired. Fill out an application in Human Resources. Be thankful that I'm not suing you for damages." Tears were already glistening in June's eyes. "Mrs. Battler, I don't know where you got this information, but it's a lie. I never discussed you with my colleagues, not to mention any bad gossip, and I have never sold any information to anyone. I have a child and credit. I need this job. Please, don't fire me." I told you all I wanted. Leave my office." June walked out of the office. Colleagues were already waiting for June to find out why she had been summoned. When she said she was dismissed, everyone was puzzled. Sheila hugged June and tried to comfort her. After an hour, June gathered her personal belongings, said goodbye to her colleagues, and left. Walking home, she was crushed. The tears flowed by themselves. "Why is everything like this? Why? I didn't do anything wrong." She was going through the park. Suddenly, a man in dirty clothes with a black eye came up to her and asked her for money. June was confused. She had just lost her job, but she didn't have the strength to explain it to him. She pulled out everything she had in her pocket and gave it to him. The man thanked her, said he would pay her back, and asked for her phone number. But June was immersed in her unhappy thoughts and answered that he did not need to return anything and went on her way. At home, she was crying all the evening because of the injustice of fate. With these anxious thoughts, she went to sleep. The next morning, June sat down at the computer and started to look for a job. There were no good vacancies, but June did not care. She had to find something, since she had a credit. She started sending out her resume and calling potential employers. 2 weeks went by. The woman still hadn't found a job. One day, she was on her way to pick up her child from school and saw an ad on the door of a restaurant. A waitress was needed. June went in, talked to the manager, and agreed to come out tomorrow. The team was good, only June hadn't seen the owner yet. They said he was on vacation. Even though June was tired physically, the salary was only a little less than at the last job, and she was glad that she got a job in the restaurant. Once, June was serving a banquet. There was a large company. When everyone was pretty drunk, the men began to behave boorishly. June could barely restrain herself from replying to them as they deserved. When the banquet was over, everyone left, but one man was still sitting there pretending to try to find a cab number. June was clearing a nearby table when suddenly this visitor came up behind her and started hitting on her. She tried to get away from him, but she couldn't. Suddenly, someone came up behind him and grabbed his arm and pushed him out onto the street. "How are you?" asked her rescuer. "Thank you very much. Thanks to you, I feel better already," replied June. She looked closely at the rescuer and gasped. It was the man she had given her last money to in the park. He recognized her too. They stood looking at each other. The man smiled and held out his hand to her. "And yet we never got to introduce ourselves. My name is Paul. I'm the owner of this restaurant." "June, nice to meet you." "June, you've had a hard day. I'll take you home now. You can clean up in the morning." June tried to refuse, but Paul was persistent. Finally, they got into his expensive car, and June couldn't resist asking what he was doing in the park that day. "You know, it was an accident. I was just walking in the park. I saw guys hitting on a girl. I stepped in. The girl managed to escape, and I was beaten up pretty badly. When I regained consciousness, I didn't have my wallet or my phone, and that's when I saw you. I definitely wouldn't be able to get home if you hadn't been there. I barely made it out of the park and got in a cab. I drove to a friend's house, blocked my cards, and then he drove me to the hospital. Anyway, I am in debt to you." "I'm glad I could help you. Here's my house. Thanks for the ride." June came to work early the next morning because she needed to clean up the banquet hall. However, it was all cleaned up. The other waitresses were already whispering about yesterday. It turned out that Paul came back after giving her a ride home and then cleaned everything up. In the evening, June got off work. It was snowing outside, sprinkling everything with a white carpet. Paul was with a big bouquet of roses near his car. They looked at each other for a long moment, and although June had stopped believing in miracles, but now she wished to start believing in them again. She felt he was her destiny. Finally, Paul came up and hugged her tightly, and they stood like that for a long time. A few months later, they were married, and they had a strong family. June's son was happy too, because Paul was able to replace his father, and soon the family had a baby girl. One day, the colleagues from June's previous job had a corporate party at her restaurant, and they told June that Sheila had set her up at the time. Her new boyfriend was from a rival company, and she showed him the documents with important information. June listened, but this did not bother June anymore. She was even glad that everything had turned out this way, because thanks to it, she had found her real love.